Okay, finishing out week 3. First of all, we know that when the trig value is not on the unit circle, we draw a triangle. We're also going to be really careful with the quadrant and the signs of our values because remember, we're not going to get that from our math necessarily, right? So on this first one, it says we're in quadrant 1, so that's where we'll draw our triangle. And they give me the information for sine, so I'll put that on my triangle. And then before I can find secant and cotangent, I need the measure of that third side, right? So I'll use the Pythagorean theorem to find that. Notice I'm shortcutting this more than I did in class the other day, right? And we get the square root of 21, and then I can use that information to find the secant and the cotangent. And again, they are asking in the instructions for exact values, so you don't have to worry about rationalizing. On the next one, we're in quadrant 2, so we'll draw a triangle in quadrant 2, and we know the sine is 12 over 13, so we'll do the Pythagorean theorem, and we get 5 for our missing side. Remember, this is a Pythagorean triple, 5, 12, 13. We see it all the time, so if you can remember that, less work for you, right? But since we're in the second quadrant, that 5 is negative. So that's why it's so important to pay attention to the quadrant, because you can do the math for the Pythagorean theorem, but you'll get the problem wrong if your sign is incorrect. And then we can find our secant and our tangent. Next, we are in quadrant 3. So we'll draw our triangle in quadrant 3. And then they give us the information for cotangent. But since we're in quadrant 3, we know that both of those have to be negative, right? We'll find our third side using the Pythagorean theorem. This is a 3, 4, 5, which is another Pythagorean triple. Then we'll find our sine and our secant. So the only difference between these and the two we did before is that now they're giving us the reciprocal identity information instead of our basic identities. Next, we are in quadrant 4. So we'll draw our triangle in quadrant 4, and they give us the secant information. But we know that in quadrant 4, my y is negative, right? So that side there has to be negative. Again, it's a 3, 4, 5. And then we can put our information on. The last topic is going to have us using more of the reasoning for the unit circle, even though this is not on the unit circle. So first here, they tell me that cosecant is negative 3/2. What I'm going to pay attention to right now is that cosecant is negative. And cosecant is negative when y is negative, right? Because it's 1 over sine. And that occurs in quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Now we're going to go to our cotangent is greater than 0, which means that cotangent is positive. Cotangent is positive when x and y are the same, right? Either positive over positive or negative over negative. And that occurs in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3, so we must be in quadrant 3. So that's where I'll draw my triangle. Then I'm going to put my cosecant information on and use the Pythagorean theorem to find the missing side. But I know that since we're in quadrant 3, that missing side is negative. So now that I have all the information, I can pull the tangent and secant off of my triangle. For the next one, they tell me cotangent is 5 over 12. The part I'm interested right now is that cotangent is positive. Again, that happens when x and y are the same, and that's in quadrant 1 or quadrant 3. Next, they tell me secant is greater than 0, which means that secant is positive. Secant is positive when x is positive. That's in quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. So we must be in quadrant 1. That's where we'll draw our triangle, put our information on. This is a 5, 12, 13, right? You could still do the Pythagorean theorem. You would still get 13. And then we can pull our information off of that triangle. To be sure that you're okay with the reasoning, here's just 2 more real quick. First information gives me cosine is negative. That means x is negative, and that happens in quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. Then that tangent is negative. Tangent is negative where x and y are different in quadrant 2 and quadrant 4. We must be in quadrant 2. Draw our triangle there, put our information on, use the Pythagorean theorem, or we just see, again, that's a 5, 12, 13. Once I have that, I can pull my information out. Last one. Cosecant is negative where y is negative. That's quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Cotangent is positive where x and y are the same, quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. So we must be in 3. Draw our triangle there, put our information on, do Pythagorean theorem. But remember that if we are in quadrant 3, that value that we found must be negative, then we can pull everything off of our triangle. All right, that's it.